ask me because I have been very vocal from the get-go, despite the scrutiny, despite what the Courier Journal says, despite what anyone says, I have been very vocal on this issue. But they ask me, my opponents ask me, what would you have done differently? But let me tell you about the proper role of government in a circumstance like this, in my opinion, because, you know, we work for you, not the other way around.
Yeah!
It is the appropriate role of government to provide you with the accurate information that you need about this situation, about a virus, about anything, to make good, informed decisions about your health, but never to use the force of government to make you become prisoners in your own homes.
Many of these folks that I'm standing with today are licensed by the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and if they don't feel that it's in their best interest to receive the vaccine at this time, then they should have the right to not be forced by their employer.
Did you all ever think that would happen in America?
No!
I never thought that would happen in America. I was the lone voice in the wilderness at the state level for so long, the only elected official in Frankfort willing to stand up and say, no, we will not abide.
And as far as the legislative process, whether you're talking about in Frankfort or in Washington, D.C., I do see a lot of similarities. Many of you all may be aware that I fought fiercely for House Bill 28, which would have removed the government's ability to mandate a vaccine, passed out of the House, died in the Senate. Folks, you know, I'm not going to make any bones about the fact that I believe that we need to elect authentic Republicans who will abide by the will of people and pass legislation like that. Mississippi just did 4 days ago. There is no reason in the Commonwealth of Kentucky with a supermajority that we couldn't have got that done. But it comes down to again, sticking to your guns, standing firm on principle, and not yielding. If we are willing to fight for our constitutional rights and liberties, if we are willing to say no to mandates, and I'm not just talking about COVID mandates, I'm talking about in general, the size and scale of government has just multiplied and multiplied. We've got to get it back under control and restore the consent of the governed. We have to protect our individual liberties and freedom.
You can call it an ERPO. You can call it a red flag law, but you are knowingly violating, at a bare minimum, 3 constitutional rights in the U.S. Constitution alone, as well as a plethora of others in the Kentucky Constitution, which is decidedly more specific in its purview of individual liberties. This proposal reflects a very serious threat to the foundation that a citizen's rights within the judicial system are built upon, including but not limited to the right to due process, the presumption of innocence that distinguishes our form of government from other nations where individual rights and liberties are not so sacredly protected.
But let's not forget what we're really here to fight for. A chance to dethrone Andy Bashir, the guy who shut down our state, closed schools, and harassed churchgoers on Easter Sunday. I was standing up to the tyrant from day one, long before it was popular or politically expedient to do so. Kentuckians are fed up with the disastrous lack of leadership demonstrated by Joe Biden and Andy Bashir. The question becomes, will Kentucky's next governor be an authentic Republican like Ron DeSantis who will fight for your constitutional rights and freedoms? Or will it be a go-along-to-get-along moderate who is afraid to take decisive action?
What is the proper role of government in this situation?
The appropriate role of government in this situation is to provide accurate, up-to-date information in order that citizens can make good decisions for themselves and their families. And I firmly believe that they are able to. What is not the appropriate role of government is to shut down the economy, to engage in this pattern of overreach in terms of the mandates and restrictions, and to create the kind of economic destruction that we've seen, not just in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but all across the nation. And I don't think that the overreach, unfortunately, can be drawn upon partisan lines, because we have seen Republican governors and lawmakers as well that have engaged or at least condoned this pattern of overreach. So I think, again, that this is the moment in time where we need to stand firm on principle, uphold the Constitution, and redefine the appropriate role of government in our lives as the founders intended.
My question, lady, is how can the
government, as the only person that's responsible for the common good, take actions to protect the common good if they have no information?
Lady from Grant.
I think information's a key word that the lady has said. I think it's the appropriate role of government to provide accurate, up-to-date information to its citizens. I do not think that the words protection or the government's role to keep people safe or save lives or any of these euphemisms that we continue to hear that are essentially euphemisms for forcing a needle into someone's arm against their will. That's what mandatory vaccination is. So I think that the word information is key there. That is the role of government, not to compel citizens to comply with vaccine mandates against their will.
Lady from Jefferson.
And one last question, sir. Will she yield?
She will yield.
So if I'm to understand it, with the lady so eloquently spoke of our rights and the democracy. So if we have rights under a democracy, with every right, there is a corresponding responsibility. If a parent elects not to have their child be vaccinated, can then that school system say, thank you very much, find other ways to educate your child so the other children won't be at risk?
Lady from Grant.
Lady, parents and guardians have the right to make medical decisions for their children. If you or any other member wants to file a piece of legislation that takes away that right and makes it the government's responsibility to decide what vaccines a child should or shouldn't get, then that's your prerogative as a member. But this bill is intended to expand the ability of parents and guardians to choose what's best for their own children. You couldn't get more local control than that. You couldn't get more home rule than that. Thank you. I heard a comment earlier about owning a firearm being a privilege. That is not a privilege. Owning a firearm for law-abiding citizens is a right. It is absolutely a right. And it is currently being treated as a privilege, much similar to driving on our highways, for instance, which is a privilege. We should not have to ask permission from our government and pay recurrent fees to be able to exercise our Second Amendment rights.
We have to be willing to elect Republicans that will stand firm in principle